You got to pardon me, folks. I'm jawing away at you like you know me, and you don't know me, madam. First Sergeant Shelvin Shropshire, 8th Company, 10th U.S. Cavalry, Colonel Benjamin Grierson, commanding. At your service. These 4 new regiments were to be made up entirely of Negro troops, commanded by white officers. With the passing of this act, Congress opened a whole new chapter in American military history. The life of a Buffalo soldier in the 9th and 10th Cavalry was not an easy one. Our average tour of duty was 7 to 10 years without furlough of any kind. The Indians, they was far from ignorant to what was going on. They knew we were fighting amongst ourselves, and they took full advantage of the distraction to reclaim lost ground. And reclaim it they did. A lone rider appeared, wrapped in a heavy wool blanket, walking his mount slowly through that crowd. Private Gibson tapped me on the shoulder, whispered in my ear, "Uh-oh, Sergeant, there's going to be trouble. Here comes Lone Wolf." We soldiers of the 9th and 10th Cavalry, we didn't ride into frontier towns to parades and cheers, insults, isolated incidences of violence, and sometimes outright cold-blooded murder. The situation in Texas and across the Rio Grande was just as bad. Rampaging Kiowa and Comanche warriors rained death and destruction from the Red River in the north to the Rio Grande and many miles into Mexico. Apaches came in hordes from the south, committing rape and murder and other deprivations and sneaking back into their almost inaccessible hideaways in the Guadalupe Mountains. He shouted, "Tell those Indians violence will not save their chiefs!" At that second, the shutters on the windows to Colonel Grierson's house flew open, revealing a dozen Buffalo soldiers from the 10th Cavalry. Carbine was aimed directly at the 5 chiefs. At the same time, the gates to the high wall corral left to Colonel Grierson's house open. Out came fully ready 8th Company, surrounding the Indians on the parade deck, weapons at the ready. Indians quiet and sat on the ground. The war story of the Buffalo Soldiers kind of fades into obscurity. It's important that you know, that you understand. 2 regiments of cavalry, the 9th and 10th U.S. Cavalry. 22 years of service. 19 Congressional Medals of Honor. 19 were issued to the men of the 9th and 10th Cavalry. There are no military units in the history of this country with such a record of heroism. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated Temple of Liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems are inhumane mockery. This 4th of July is your Independence Day, not mine. You may celebrate. I must mourn. My subject, fellow citizens, is American slavery. Early in my public life in the anti-slavery movement, it was necessary for me to write and publish a narrative on my life. The information contained therein exposed me to the very real danger of arrest and return to a life of slavery. And then one day, a lady knocked on our door. My grandmother told me she was my mother. I was very glad to see her. I tell you, slavery is bad enough. Slavery under a pious man is worse. Under the cruel hand of Edward Covey, I was dragged into the woods, stripped naked, and beaten bloody with a cowhide or a tree branch, weekly, for the smallest infraction, or for nothing at all. I turned and faced him. In that second of time, I decided, I will not be whipped again. I looked him square in his eye, and Mr. Covey raised his hand and charged me. "Resist me, will you, you scoundrel?" I stared straight back in his eyes. "Yes, sir, I will." He charged me and we embraced, and we struggled. Edward Covey cursing and spitting, trying as he could to hurt me, me taking only defensive moves to be sure I wasn't injured. The price of my flesh and blood. But now that slavery was destroyed, master and slave stand on equal ground. I was not only willing to meet with him, I was glad to do it. We are not leaving this building until I see Abraham Lincoln. At that moment, a gentleman walked by an intersecting hallway. "Would you tell President Lincoln Frederick Douglass is here to see him and being detained by his officers?" But now our lives were verging towards a point where the differences disappear, where the constancy of hatred breaks down, where the clouds of pride, passion, and selfishness vanish before the brightness of infinite light.